The thunderous echo of Robert Sterling's voice ripped through the opulent penthouse, a luxurious, 300-meter expanse that typically only whispered of wealth. "Where is my Rolex watch?" His angry eyes, sharp and accusatory, scoured every polished surface, every expensive furnishing, until they landed on Maria, who stood silently, meticulously organizing cleaning products. The 32-year-old woman paused, her movements precise, and met his furious gaze directly. "I don't know anything about a watch, Mr. Sterling," she stated, her voice calm, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in his features. "Of course, you do." Robert lunged toward her, his face a mottled red with barely contained rage. "You were the only person who entered my closet today. A $50,000 Submariner doesn't just disappear." Maria stood tall, her hands firmly gripping the cleaning cloth, a small, worn comfort. 5 years of working for elite cleaning services had taught her to navigate the volatile moods of the wealthy, to absorb the casual contempt and veiled suspicions. But something about Robert's tone today was different. It was sharper, more cruel, undeniably personal. "I can check my purse if that will make you feel better," she offered, her voice steady despite the familiar pang of indignation that always accompanied these situations. It was a dull ache, a quiet protest against the presumption of guilt. "Oh, you'll be sure to check." Robert snatched his cell phone from his pocket, his thumb already flying across the screen. "And the police will take a look too. People like you always think they can take advantage of hardworking people like me." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken prejudice. It was at that precise moment that a desperate cry pierced the tension, cutting through the silence of the luxurious apartment. Robert's baby, little 6-month-old Leo, was in his crib in the next room, crying with an intensity that made Maria's brow furrow with concern. This wasn't the usual fussing of hunger or the sleepy protest of a waking infant. It was something deeper, more visceral, a raw distress that vibrated through the very walls. "Your son is crying," Maria observed, her voice low, a quiet reminder of something beyond the glittering facade of wealth and accusation. Robert didn't even glance toward the bedroom, his focus still locked on Maria, his anger a blinding force. "The nanny takes care of that. Now open that bag." But Leo's cries only intensified, growing more desperate, more heartbreaking. Maria, despite all the rigid rules of cleaning protocol, found she couldn't ignore it. Her feet moved almost instinctively, carrying her towards the baby's room. What she saw shocked her. Leo was alone, his small face red and tear-streaked, his diaper visibly soiled from hours of crying. There was no nanny in sight. "Hi, little one," Maria whispered, approaching the crib carefully, her voice a soft balm in the charged air. Her maternal instincts, honed by years of caring for her own nephews, immediately took over, pushing aside the fear and indignation. "What's going on here?" she murmured, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. In a matter of seconds, she quickly checked if Leo was okay, changed his soiled diaper, and gently picked him up. The moment the baby nestled into her arms, he stopped crying completely, a sudden, profound silence replacing the earlier anguish. Leo seemed to melt against her, as if he had finally found the comfort and security he had been desperately seeking. "What the hell are you doing?" Robert's furious voice sliced through the brief moment of peace. He appeared at the door, still clutching his cell phone, his face a mask of disbelief and renewed rage. "Put my son down right now." Maria carefully handed Leo over, her movements deliberate, almost a silent plea for gentleness. But the instant Robert took his son into his arms, the baby's cries erupted again, even more intensely than before. Robert tried rocking him, talking to him, jiggling him, but nothing worked. Leo seemed utterly inconsolable in his own father's arms, his small body stiff with renewed distress. The contrast was stark, undeniable, and it hung heavy in the air between them. "I don't understand," Robert muttered, clearly frustrated, his earlier fury now tinged with a bewildered helplessness as Leo continued to wail in his arms. The powerful businessman, accustomed to controlling every aspect of his life, found himself utterly outmaneuvered by his own infant son. "Babies sense tension," Maria explained simply, her voice gentle, but firm. "When adults are nervous or aggressive, they notice." Robert stared at her, a strange mixture of surprise and irritation flickering in his eyes. The implication hung heavy in the air. Are you implying that I'm a bad father? He retorted, his voice rising, a defensive edge returning. I'm just explaining why your son calmed down with me, Maria clarified, her gaze steady. For a brief, fleeting moment, something shifted in Robert's eyes, a spark of curiosity, perhaps even a sliver of grudging respect. It was a flicker of genuine human connection, a chink in his armor of arrogance. But it lasted only seconds before the familiar shield of superiority slammed back into place. Well, what a convenient coincidence, he said, his voice now heavy with sarcasm, laced with venom. The same person who steals my watch also has a magic touch with babies. What a well-crafted story. Maria took a deep, steadying breath. For years, she had swallowed prejudiced comments, endured suspicious looks, and navigated veiled accusations. She had learned to let them roll off her, maintaining her composure and professionalism. But this time, something was different. This time, she wasn't going to back down. The humiliation of being accused of theft, coupled with the insinuation that her compassion was merely a cunning ruse, ignited a quiet resolve within her. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice calm but now infused with an unwavering firmness, let me make one thing clear, I did not take your watch. Her eyes held his, direct and unblinking. And if you're determined to accuse me without proof, I suggest you call the police. I'm sure they'll be very interested in investigating everything. Her tone, cool and collected, made Robert hesitate for a moment. There was something about Maria's unshakable confidence, the way she met his gaze, that made him slightly uneasy, as if she knew something he didn't. It was the subtle discomfort of a predator sensing a shift in the dynamics, an unexpected challenge. That's right, Maria continued, her movements precise and calculated as she began organizing her cleaning materials. She worked with the quiet efficiency of someone who had absolutely nothing to hide, but also, paradoxically, like someone who had perhaps been waiting for this exact moment. A full investigation. Security cameras. Records. History. Everything. Robert watched her, a knot forming in his stomach. Worse than someone with nothing to hide, she seemed like someone who had been preparing for this. What Robert Sterling couldn't possibly imagine was that this false accusation had just awakened something in Maria that had been dormant for years. And when you underestimate someone who has been through much worse, you're not just making a mistake, you're unknowingly signing your own death warrant. Monica's, Maria's, unshakable confidence unsettled Richard, Robert, for just a few seconds. Soon, his natural arrogance reassumed control, and he completely misinterpreted her calmness. Full investigation, Richard laughed cruelly. Perfect. The more evidence, the better. He typed frantically on his cell phone. I'm sending a message to the entire elite cleaning services team. I want them to know exactly what kind of employee you have. Maria continued organizing her materials, but her jaw tightened slightly. She knew this pattern all too well. During 5 years of cleaning homes for the elite, she had witnessed dozens of similar situations. Missing objects that magically reappeared after the domestic worker had been publicly humiliated. In fact, Richard continued, clearly emboldened by his own venom, I'm going to post this on my social media as well. I need to warn other employers about people like you. Something changed in the air when Richard uttered those last words. Maria stopped moving completely, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made the businessman take an involuntary step backward. People like me, she repeated slowly, her voice a low, dangerous hum. How interesting. And what kind of person am I, Mr. Sterling? Richard hesitated, realizing he had stepped on dangerous ground, but his ego would not allow him to back down. People who take advantage of others' trust, who think they can walk into family homes and steal. Maria finished for him. Is that what you were trying to say? Richard's phone vibrated. A message from his lawyer. Meeting cancelled. Urgent family matter. Richard ignored it, too focused on his personal crusade to notice the first sign that his day was about to fall apart. You know what's interesting, Mr. Sterling? Maria closed her briefcase with precise movements. In 5 years of working for families like yours, this is the first time someone has accused me of theft. First time you got caught. Richard retorted with disdain. Or the first time someone lost something and automatically blamed the only black person in the room. Maria's words came out with an icy calm that made Richard swallow hard. Richard's cell phone vibrated again. Then once more. He ignored it, determined to maintain control of a situation that was clearly slipping through his fingers. "Listen here," Richard approached her, trying to intimidate her with his physical presence. "I've known people like you forever. You come in with this dignified attitude, but deep down what?" Maria turned completely toward him, and for the first time, Richard noticed something in her eyes that made him question whether he had chosen the wrong person to humiliate. Leo began to cry again from the bedroom, but this time neither of them moved. The tension in the apartment had become almost palpable, a suffocating weight in the lavish space. "I'll tell you something about people like me," Maria said, picking up her purse. "We grow up learning that the truth always comes out. Always. And when it does, those who lied pay a very high price." Richard laughed forcedly. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm just letting you know how the real world works." Maria walked toward the door. "Oh, and Mr. Sterling, I suggest you check your pockets, and maybe your car. Men like you have a habit of blaming others for their mistakes." Richard's phone exploded in a flurry of notifications. This time he looked, 12 missed messages, 3 missed calls, all from his office. "Where do you think you're going?" he shouted after Maria. "The police are on their way." "Great," she replied, standing in the doorway. "I love the police, especially when they see the building's security cameras." Richard frowned. "What cameras?" "The cameras that show everything that happens in the hallways, elevators, and parking lot of this building. The same ones that will show that I arrived here at 9 this morning and haven't left once since then. Mostly," Maria smiled for the first time, a knowing, almost predatory curve of her lips, "the ones that will show where you really lost your watch." That's when Richard started to sweat. Not just because of what Maria said, but because of how she said it, like someone who already knew exactly what those cameras would reveal. His phone rang. The name on the screen made his blood run cold. "Private investigator, urgent." "Excuse me," Maria said politely. "I need to find my next house. But don't worry, Mr. Sterling, I'm sure we'll get to the bottom of this today." As she disappeared down the hallway, Richard finally answered the phone with trembling hands. "Mr. Sterling," the investigator's voice was tense, "we need to talk right away. It's about your wife." Richard felt the world spin. "My wife? She's not even in town." "That's exactly what we need to talk about." Each new humiliation only fueled something inside Maria that her oppressors couldn't see. A silent strength being fortified by the very injustice they tried to impose on her. What Richard Sterling didn't know was that every act of contempt was writing his own sentence of defeat, while the woman he was trying to destroy carried secrets that would turn his perfect life to ashes. The call from the private investigator completely changed Robert's tone of voice. "What do you mean it's about my wife? Victoria is in Miami visiting her mother." "Mr. Sterling, I need you to sit down. Your wife is not in Miami. She has been in Las Vegas for 3 weeks with another man." Robert's world collapsed in a matter of seconds, the foundation of his seemingly perfect life cracking under the weight of this revelation. "That's impossible. She calls me every day." The calls are made from her cell phone, but through apps that mask the location. "I have photos, hotel records, and other evidence." While Robert processed his wife's betrayal, reeling from the sudden, devastating blow, Maria was already in the building's parking lot, making a crucial call. "Carmen, I need you to do me a favor. Remember that private security course I took before I came to the United States?" "Sure. You were the best student in the class. Why?" "I need you to contact our instructor, Detective Martinez. Tell him Maria Santos needs a little professional favor." Carmen hesitated. "Sister, are you in trouble?" "Not yet," Maria smiled, watching the building's security cameras, a glint of steel in her eyes, "but someone will be soon." What no one knew about Maria was that before moving to the United States, she had worked for 5 years as a private investigator in Jamaica. She wasn't just a cleaning lady. She was a woman with a degree in criminology who had chosen cleaning jobs to support her graduate studies in forensic psychology. 30 minutes later, Detective Martinez returned her call. Maria Santos, my best former student. What can I do for you? I need legal access to the security footage from a building and maybe a little investigation into a man named Robert Sterling. Leave it to me. How soon do you need it? 2 hours would be perfect. Meanwhile, Robert was trying to deal simultaneously with the revelation about his wife and the police who had finally arrived to investigate the theft of the watch. The two officers, Detective Johnson and Detective Rodriguez, listened to his version of events with increasingly skeptical expressions. So you're saying that a cleaning lady stole your watch, but you're not sure when or how? Detective Johnson jotted down notes on his pad. She was the only person who entered my closet today. And where exactly did you last see the watch? Robert hesitated. The truth was, he couldn't remember. With all the confusion of the last few days, meetings, travel, problems with nannies, his routine was completely out of whack. I always leave it on the nightstand. Detective Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Always. Are you absolutely certain about that? Just then, Robert's phone rang again. His family lawyer. Robert, I just got a very strange call. Someone is asking questions about you at the office. Questions about your professional conduct, your employment history. Are you under investigation for something? Robert's stomach lurched. What kind of questions? About how you treat employees, if there have been any complaints of discrimination. The line went dead. Robert tried to call back, but it went straight to voicemail. The police continued their investigation. Then, Detective Johnson received a message. Mr. Sterling, we just received an interesting report. The building security cameras show the employee arriving at 9 o'clock in the morning and not leaving until now. They also show you leaving last night at 11:45 and returning today at 8:15. And what's the problem? The problem, Detective Rodriguez continued, a subtle smirk playing on her lips, is that the same cameras show you dropping something in the parking lot last night when you got out of your car. Something that glinted in the light. Robert's face paled. That doesn't prove anything. Actually, it does. The building security team found this an hour ago. Detective Johnson showed him a plastic bag containing a Rolex watch. It was under your car, Mr. Sterling. The humiliation was complete. Robert had accused an innocent woman of theft when he himself had carelessly lost his watch. But the worst was yet to come. Detective Martinez called Maria with information that made her smile for the first time in weeks, a quiet, knowing smile. Maria, you won't believe what I found out about this Robert Sterling. He has a history of 3 racial discrimination lawsuits in the last 5 years. All settled out of court with a gag order. And there's more. His company is being investigated by the IRS for tax evasion. And from the looks of it, he's about to lose everything. His wife is filing for divorce and half his assets. The man is desperate. Maria processed the information carefully. Robert Sterling wasn't just a prejudiced man. He was a prejudiced, desperate man with a documented history of discriminatory behavior. Exactly the kind of person who needed a very public lesson. Detective Martinez, I need one more favor. Do you still have contacts in the investigative press? Yes, I do. Why? Because a story is about to be told, and this time, it will be told correctly. When Robert was finally alone in his apartment after the police left, he looked at the watch he had recovered. For a moment, he considered calling the cleaning company and apologizing. But his wounded pride spoke louder. She may have proven she didn't steal the watch, he muttered to himself, his voice venomous. But she's still just a cleaning lady. What harm can she do to me? That question would be answered very soon. Because while Robert completely underestimated the woman he had humiliated, Maria was 3 steps ahead, orchestrating a life lesson that would make Robert rethink every prejudiced choice he had ever made. What Robert couldn't imagine was that his arrogant question, "What harm can a cleaning lady do to me?" was about to become the greatest irony of his privileged life. Robert spent the afternoon trying to control the damage, like a captain desperately plugging holes in the Titanic. His wife wasn't answering her phone. His lawyer had mysteriously disappeared, and 3 major clients had abruptly cancelled contracts after receiving worrying, albeit vague, information about his professional conduct. At 5 p.m., his phone rang with an unknown number. "Mr. Sterling, this is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News Investigative. We are preparing a story on workplace discrimination and would very much like your side of some very serious allegations." "What allegations?" Robert felt cold sweat run down his back. "We have documentation of 3 racial discrimination cases in the last 5 years. All settled with very generous non-disclosure agreements. And today, we received an extremely detailed account of an incident involving an Afro-Jamaican employee." Robert hung up on the reporter, but the phone immediately rang again. This time it was Marcus, his senior partner. His voice raised in panic. "Robert, what the hell is going on? The press is calling the office asking about discrimination lawsuits. I got a strange call from someone saying, you have a systematic pattern of problematic behavior with black employees." While Robert tried to explain the inexplicable, his world continued to unravel. While Robert faced the total collapse of his privileged existence, Maria was quietly at home, preparing dinner, a serene calm settling over her. Detective Martinez called with a final report that made her smile with genuine satisfaction. The Federal Department of Civil Rights is opening a formal investigation into his company. The IRS has expedited the tax audit after the public exposure, and Dr. Patricia Williams has successfully reopened the cases of the other 3 women. Her phone rang again. "Maria Santos, this is David Chen from Chen & Associates. We are an internationally renowned corporate security firm. We saw your story in the news and would love to talk to you about a position as a senior investigator with a starting salary of $80,000 a year." Richard Blackstone had discovered in the most humiliating way possible that underestimating someone based on prejudice not only revealed his own rotten character, it created the perfect scenario for his own complete destruction. When you deliberately choose to humiliate a person who has all the tools necessary to defend herself, you're not just committing an injustice. You're handing her all the weapons she needs to completely rewrite your story and reduce your arrogance to ashes. 6 months later, Maria Santos sat in her office on the 23rd floor of Chen & Associates, supervising a team of 12 investigators. The panoramic view of the city stretched out through the glass windows, a stark contrast to the apartment she used to clean. "Miss Santos," her assistant announced over the intercom, "reporter Jennifer Walsh is here for the interview about the Civil Rights Defender of the Year award." The public recognition had come as a surprise. Her courage in documenting and exposing Robert's discriminatory behavior had inspired other victims to come forward, creating a wave of change in the city's labor policies. "Maria," Jennifer smiled as she entered, "how does it feel to know that your story changed the law on protective recordings for domestic workers?" "Satisfied, but not surprised," Maria replied with a confident smile that had become her trademark. "The truth always finds a way to the surface, especially when you give it a little help." Her investigative firm had grown exponentially. Clients came specifically asking for the woman who took down Blackstone. 3 large corporations hired her for internal discrimination audits, paying fees that exceeded her former cleaning salary tenfold. Meanwhile, across town, Robert Sterling pushed a shopping cart through a neighborhood supermarket. His fall had been brutal and complete. The company had fired him permanently, his wife, Victoria, had taken half his assets in the divorce, and no reputable firm would hire him after his national exposure. The penthouse apartment had been sold to pay legal bills. Now he lived in a small studio in the suburbs, relying on temporary jobs to survive. His presence on social media had become a classic example of how not to treat employees. Business students used his case as a study in the consequences of corporate prejudice. "Daddy, why is that lady on TV talking about you?" asked Leo, now 3 years old, during one of the rare visits Victoria allowed. Robert didn't know how to explain to his son that he had become synonymous with corporate injustice. Channel 7 regularly aired Maria's story as part of a series on overcoming adversity and social justice. That same afternoon, Maria received an unexpected call. "Miss Santos, this is Dr. Patricia Williams. I have some interesting news. Robert Sterling tried to get a job at our firm." "Really?" Maria laughed genuinely, a sound of pure, unadulterated irony. He was, of course, turned down immediately, but I thought you might like to know that he mentioned your name during the interview. He said he learned a valuable lesson and that he deeply respected your professionalism. He respected my professionalism, Maria repeated, savoring the moment. How interesting. Learning to respect people after losing everything. The transformation in Maria's life had transcended the professional realm. She had bought her mother a house in Jamaica, paid for 3 nephews to go to college, and established a foundation to support domestic workers who were victims of discrimination. Her most recent cases included exposing a labor exploitation scheme in Millionaire's homes and investigating a network of employers who shared blacklists of employees based on racial prejudice. Dr. Williams, Maria continued, I think Mr. Sterling really learned something important. Unfortunately, he learned it too late. 3 days later, Maria was speaking at a university when a student raised her hand. Miss Santos, have you ever felt the urge to take personal revenge on the man who humiliated you? Personal revenge. Maria thought for a moment, her gaze sweeping over the eager faces in the audience. No. The best revenge was to build something bigger than he could ever imagine. While he lost everything because of his prejudices, I gained a career, a life mission, and the satisfaction of knowing that my story protects other people. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Maria had become a symbol of how to turn injustice into purpose, humiliation into motivation. That night, while reviewing contracts in her office, Maria received a message on LinkedIn. It was from a young black lawyer. Miss Santos, your story inspired me not to give up when I faced discrimination at my office. Today, I got my promotion. Thank you for showing me that truth and determination always win. Maria smiled as she put her phone away. This was the true measure of her success, not just her own transformation, but how many other lives she had positively impacted. Robert Sterling had tried to destroy her based solely on the color of her skin and the assumption that people like her couldn't defend themselves. Ironically, by attacking her, he had given Maria all the tools she needed to build an empire based on protecting others like her. Justice had been served perfectly. While Robert humbly learned that prejudice has devastating consequences, Maria thrived, proving that true strength lies not in subjugating others, but in lifting them up. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building something so great that their evil becomes completely irrelevant. Robert tried to humiliate a cleaning lady and ended up creating one of the most respected investigators in the country.